The conference room at Westbridge Consulting was too quiet, unnaturally quiet. The kind of quiet that made a person feel exposed, as if every breath could be counted against them. Janelle Carter stood near the edge of the table, hands steady but heart working harder than usual. On the polished wood surface lay a single sheet of paper, angled toward her like a verdict. Her name sat at the top in bold letters, Janelle Carter, termination recommendation. No explanation, no courtesy, just her name on a document meant to erase her years of work. Around the table, the senior executives watched her with thin curiosity, whispering among themselves. Their voices drifted in and out like faint static. Across from them, Marissa Klein sat with the poise of someone who believed the outcome was already sealed. She wore a faint smile, not warm, not sympathetic, just satisfied, the kind of satisfaction a person feels when they believe they've tightened every bolt of a trap. Janelle inhaled carefully, refusing to let her voice shake. She'd come prepared. She knew what she'd discovered. She understood the weight of what she carried in her small notebook and the folders tucked beneath her arm. Today wasn't just about defending her job. It was about defending the truth. One of the executives cleared his throat. "Miss Carter, before we finalize this, do you have anything you want to say?" She lifted her eyes slightly. "Yes, I do." Her hand brushed the edge of her folder. Marissa leaned back, crossing her legs. "Make it brief," she said quietly, almost sweetly, as if extending a favor. Janelle opened her mouth to speak, but the doors swung open. A subtle shift washed through the room. Heads lifted. The whispers halted. Even the air seemed to pause. Evan Duane stepped inside, not announcing himself, not asking permission, just walking in with the calm assurance of a man who never pushed his weight around until the moment demanded it. His appearance alone rattled the room. Evan rarely showed up in corporate spaces unless a board requested him personally. His presence today sent a single clear message. Something serious had happened. He carried a navy folder in one hand, his blazer draped over his forearm. His expression wasn't angry, just focused, like a man who'd been patient long enough. Marissa's confident posture deflated by degrees. Janelle blinked, startled, her breath catching. She hadn't asked him to come. She hadn't wanted him involved. But the look he gave her wasn't one of pity. It was strength offered at the exact moment she needed steadiness. The CEO rose slightly. "Mr. Duane, we weren't expecting—" Evan spoke before the sentence finished. His voice steady, level, unmistakably controlled. "Before anyone blames my wife, you'll hear the truth." Silence dropped like a curtain. Every pair of eyes snapped back to Janelle. "Wife?" The executives exchanged glances. Marissa's face drained of confidence. A couple of partners straightened in their seats, suddenly aware they were standing on thin ice. That was the moment that shifted the balance. Janelle felt her pulse rise, not from fear, but from the realization that she wasn't standing alone. She didn't need saving, but she had support, and that mattered. Evan set his folder on the table with quiet precision. "There are details you'll want to examine before signing anything," he said, his gaze moving from one executive to the next. Details that were overlooked. Janelle stepped forward, recovering her voice. "I'd like to respond now," and the room, already tense, leaned in instinctively. But before she continued, before her evidence unfolded, another layer of tension pulsed beneath the scene, one directed not at her but at the audience watching this story. Because what was happening here wasn't unusual. People everywhere had lived some part of this moment. For a moment, no one in the room moved. The weight of Evan's statement hung in the air, stirring something deeper than workplace politics. Even the executives who barely knew Janelle found themselves shifting, almost uncomfortably, because his words echoed an experience that lived inside many people. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? The kind of blame that steals your breath before you can defend yourself? Have you ever watched someone else take credit for the work you carried on your shoulders? The kind of credit that stings because you stayed quiet just to keep the peace? Have you ever held your mouth shut until someone pushed you one step too far? That's where Janelle stood now, on the edge between silence and truth. She wasn't perfect, but she was steady. She wasn't loud, but she was consistent. And the cruelest part was that someone used her quiet nature as an opening to try to tear her down. But the truth, Janelle hadn't failed at her job. Marissa had set her up. Missing files, deleted entries, manipulated data, deadlines designed to crush her. Every piece of it pointed toward Janelle because someone wanted her gone. Someone wanted her name on that paper, someone who thought she wouldn't fight back. But what Marissa didn't know, what she could never prepare for, was that Janelle carried something she didn't flaunt, the truth, documented and undeniable, and a partner who understood exactly how serious this moment was. Evan tapped the folder he had brought. "This," he said calmly, "is why you need to slow down before finalizing anything." The room stilled again as he opened it. He placed the folder on the center of the table, sliding it forward with controlled confidence. "You're firing the wrong person." A simple statement, yet every executive stiffened at the implication. The match had been struck, and the fire was about to spread in directions no one prepared for. The CEO exhaled slowly. "Mr. Duane, Miss Carter, we will hear everything." And in that instant, the audience watching this story can feel it. This isn't a moment of defeat for Janelle. It's the moment her voice steps into the light. But before we continue, the question that keeps the viewer hooked is simple. What happens when the quiet woman who fixes everything finally chooses to stand her ground? What happens when truth speaks louder than rank? Stay with me, because the way this meeting ends shocks everyone in this room. Welcome to Mr. Brugman's Stories, where powerful stories don't just entertain, they teach life-changing lessons. If you're new to this family, thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button because it helps us share stories like this on YouTube. Today we embark on a new journey to bring peace and love to the world. God bless you as you listen to this story. By 7:30 on Monday morning, the steel and glass halls of Westbridge Consulting hummed with early footsteps. Janelle Carter moved through the corridor with her usual calm stride, a leather notebook tucked against her chest. The overhead lights reflected off polished floors, catching brief glimpses of her reflection as she passed. She didn't need loud gestures or force to be noticed. Her steadiness had built its own quiet reputation over the years. Her workstation sat near the window overlooking Elliott Bay. The skyline shimmered under the morning gray, and the faint scent of rain drifted through the vents. Janelle slipped into her chair, powering up her laptop before taking a sip from her stainless steel mug. Already, she could sense where the day's problems would form. Numbers that didn't align, meetings that would run longer than necessary, emails that hinted at issues the senior staff had overlooked. This was the rhythm she'd mastered. As reports loaded, she scanned through risk summaries from the previous quarter. A discrepancy caught her eye immediately, a projected figure that didn't match last week's calculation. She traced the source, found the line where someone had manually adjusted a formula and corrected it with 3 keystrokes. No announcement, no grand declaration. It was the kind of fix she made a dozen times a day. Her gift wasn't just organization, it was foresight. Most people reacted to problems. Janelle met them before they even arrived. By 9 o'clock, she'd already flagged 2 items for the compliance team and restructured a slide deck one of the junior analysts had rushed on Friday. She copied the analyst privately, adding a gentle note. "Recheck the sequence on the 3rd slide. Good start. Keep going." Janelle believed in lifting others quietly. Praise didn't need a spotlight. But even with her steady contributions, recognition never lingered long at her desk. Executives praised results without acknowledging the hands that prepared them. Reports were attributed to teams rather than individuals. When presentations ran smoothly, the applause stopped at the manager's row. Janelle didn't complain. She had learned long ago that some people saw only the faces closest to power, not the ones working under the surface. As she completed another set of notes, she sensed someone approaching and straightened in her chair. Marissa Klein stopped at her desk, a tablet tucked under her arm. Her expression was polite, but her eyes held something sharper, a scrutiny Janelle had learned to read over the years. "Morning," Marissa said, tapping her tablet lightly. "Morning," Janelle replied evenly. Marissa scanned the risk summaries on Janelle's second monitor. "Already reviewing last quarter's data?" "Yes," Janelle answered. "Some of the figures didn't match the archived reports. I corrected the formulas." Marissa nodded once, though her lips tightened momentarily. "Good. We'll need that level of detail this week." She paused before adding, "The partners have high expectations." "I understand." Marissa hesitated, as though weighing whether to say more. Eventually she continued, "Stay available today. We may need quick turnarounds." With that, she gave a short nod and moved on. The interaction stayed with Janelle long after Marissa walked away. There was always a slight tension woven into their conversations, not open conflict, but a subtle pressure. Marissa expected excellence yet rarely acknowledged it. She delegated heavy tasks to Janelle, then shifted credit upward without blinking. Janelle didn't resent her, she just wished the relationship wasn't so rigid. Sometimes she wondered if Marissa suspected something about her personal life, some reason why Janelle never sought visibility. But even if Marissa did, she would never guess the truth, because the truth wasn't something Janelle flaunted. She glanced briefly at the photo pinned to her monitor, a candid shot of her husband, Evan Duane, holding their daughter Lara in his arms at a summer fair. Evan's position in Seattle's financial circles was known among certain executives, but Janelle went out of her way to keep her marriage separate from her workplace. Evan's influence could shift meetings and open doors with a phone call, but she'd never asked him to do any of that. She didn't want whispers behind her back. She didn't want her colleagues thinking she moved ahead because of who she lived with, rather than what she could do. She wanted her work to speak for itself, even if no one listened closely. Still, she often carried the quiet fear that one day someone would discover the connection and diminish everything she'd worked for. She would rather go unnoticed than be misjudged. She had fought her way into this world through effort, education, and consistency. She wasn't about to let her identity be reduced to someone else's assumptions. At 10:30, she stepped away from her desk to refill her mug. Passing the lobby windows, she caught sight of the city she'd grown up in. Ferries moving across the bay. Cranes rising over marina rooftops, clouds rolling in from the west. Seattle always carried a kind of restless beauty, a skyline built on resilience. Janelle related to that. Her mind drifted briefly to Lara. Her daughter would be finishing morning reading soon at school. Before leaving the apartment today, Janelle had bent down to zip Lara's jacket and promised after work, "We'll go to the park if the rain slows down." Lara had grinned and answered, "Even if it drizzles, we can still fly the kites." That promise tugged gently at Janelle's heart. She intended to keep it. No matter how heavy work became, no matter how much pressure she felt, she always tried to keep her daughter's world bright. Janelle returned to her desk and exhaled. She had a full day ahead. Meetings, numbers, deadlines, all the invisible threads she held together for the company. And although no one acknowledged it, she carried them with quiet strength. She didn't know yet that today would be the beginning of something deeper, something that would test her principles and push her into a light she never sought. But for now, she focused on her screen. Her workday was only beginning. The evening sky over Capitol Hill carried a soft glow as Janelle walked up the steps to her apartment, her shoulders finally relaxing after a long day. Rain had passed through earlier, leaving beads of water clinging to the iron railing. When she opened the door, warmth greeted her immediately. The smell of grilled salmon drifting from the kitchen, and the muted sound of Lara humming somewhere in the living room. Evan glanced up from the stove as she set her bag aside. "You're home," he said, smiling in a way that made the long day fall away from her shoulders. "I made it," she replied with a tired laugh. Traffic was slow. He plated the salmon and added roasted vegetables on the side. "I figured you needed something warm. You've had a long stretch lately. That obvious?" she asked, leaning against the counter while loosening her scarf. Evan gave a gentle shrug. "You carry the same expression every time you absorb half the office workload." He wasn't criticizing, he was observing, the way someone who pays close attention learns to read small shifts in the person they love. Before she could answer, a blur of energy raced across the living room. "Mom," Lara charged toward her, throwing her arms around her waist. "Look what I made today." Janelle bent down and hugged her daughter tightly, before Lara tugged her toward the couch where a stack of construction paper sat. Janelle exchanged a warm look with Evan, then followed Lara to see the masterpiece. "This one," Lara said proudly, holding up a sheet filled with bright markers, "is the downtown skyline. But look!" She pointed eagerly. In the middle stood a tall, rectangular building, drawn with careful lines. "That's the Westbridge Tower," Lara explained. "But I added something fun." She giggled and traced her finger along a winding shape attached to the side. "A giant slide for you to go down on days when your work is too much." Janelle laughed softly. "A slide would definitely improve some of my days." "You would be the fastest one down," Lara added, smiling wide, "because you're strong." Those words settled in Janelle's chest like a reminder of everything she wanted to protect. Lara's world was colorful, filled with imagination, and free from the weight of corporate expectations. Janelle wanted to keep it that way, bright, safe, and full of innocence. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is going on the fridge," she said, brushing Lara's braid. Evan walked over, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. "Dinner is ready. Come eat while it's still warm." Lara bounced toward the table, dragging Janelle behind her. They settled around the hardwood dining table, the soft glow from the pendant lights creating a calm atmosphere. Family dinners were a ritual here, one space where time slowed down and everything felt balanced. So, Evan began, serving the plates. Tell me about your day. The real version, not the polished one you give at work. Janelle sighed, pushing her hair behind her ear. It was complicated. Complicated how? He asked gently. She took a moment to gather her thoughts. Marissa assigned me a major task this morning, a risk audit with missing data. She presented it like an urgent situation but hasn't given me proper access or support. Janelle paused, leaning back slightly. It feels like she's setting me up for a fall. Evan watched her carefully. Did something else happen? You look tense. Janelle rested her fork on the plate. She's been giving me these assignments without resources, then taking credit when things go well. When anything goes wrong, it lands on my desk, even if it wasn't my responsibility. Today, it felt deliberate. Lara had paused mid-bite, listening closely. Janelle noticed and softened her tone. Work stuff, she assured her daughter, touching her cheek. Nothing you need to worry about. Evan reached across the table, offering his hand. She took it, feeling the warmth she always relied on. Do you want me to step in? He asked quietly. He wasn't offering power. He was offering support. There was a difference. No, she answered, shaking her head. I need to handle this myself. If anyone finds out who you are to me, they'll assume I've been using your influence. I can't let that happen. Evan nodded slowly, understanding without argument. Okay. But remember, I'm here. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. I know. They continued eating, letting the conversation shift to lighter topics. Lara's art club, a joke Evan had heard earlier, plans for the weekend. Between laughter and small stories, the tension of Janelle's day loosened its grip. After dinner, Lara tugged her toward the window again. Look at this one, she said, pulling out another drawing. It's you and Daddy holding hands at the park. And I added a kite because we didn't get to fly ours last time. Janelle smiled at the bright colors. We'll go soon, I promise. You said that yesterday, Lara reminded her, though her tone wasn't accusing, just hopeful. Janelle knelt, smoothing a hand over her daughter's cheek. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Evan walked over, slipping an arm around Janelle's waist. We'll try this week, he added, kissing Lara's forehead. Maybe after school tomorrow. Lara beamed. Okay. Janelle looked around their apartment, tall windows, bookshelves filled with stories, Lara's artwork taped on the walls, and the plant her mother gave her blooming beside the balcony door. In this home, things felt simple, clear, steady. Dinner dishes were stacked in the sink by the time Lara ran off to grab pajamas. Janelle leaned back against the counter again, letting out a long exhale. You're carrying too much, Evan said quietly. It'll be fine, she replied, though her voice softened with honesty. I just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. You always do, he whispered. She leaned into him, letting the moment anchor her. This home, this family, kept her centered. Whatever challenges waited at Westbridge, whatever pressure Marissa applied, Janelle had a compass stronger than fear, truth, effort, and the love of the people sitting around her table. The slide on the Westbridge Tower in Lara's drawing wasn't just a playful idea. It was a reminder that even heavy days had a path back to joy, and Janelle intended to follow that path, no matter how steep the climb ahead. By the time Monday morning rolled in, the gray clouds over Seattle matched the weight sitting on Janelle Carter's shoulders. She stepped off the bus outside Westbridge Consulting, adjusting her coat collar as a thin mist settled across the street. The city felt cold in a way that wasn't just weather. It was the kind of cold that came from stepping into a place where someone might be waiting for you to trip. Inside the lobby, the marble floor gleamed under bright lights. People rushed toward elevators with coffee cups and crisp folders, greeting each other with quick nods. Janelle moved through the building with her usual calm pace, though her mind was still replaying parts of the conversation she'd had with Evan last night. She's giving you too much without support, he had said. It feels deliberate, she'd replied. And this morning, she felt it more sharply than ever. Her desk was exactly as she'd left it on Friday, neatly organized, her hibiscus plant standing tall, Lara's drawing pinned to the side of her monitor. She brushed her fingers over the paper slide attached to the Westbridge Tower, letting the childlike creativity steady her for a moment. She barely had time to power on her laptop before she sensed a familiar presence. Marissa Klein appeared beside her desk, tablet in hand, expression composed. Morning, Janelle, she said, voice clipped but polite. Good morning, Janelle replied. We need to meet, Marissa continued. Conference room 3. Now please. There was no hint of invitation, only instruction. Janelle stood, grabbing her notebook. Something about Marissa's tone made her stomach tighten. They walked down the hallway together, the clacking of heels against tile echoing off the glass walls. Inside the conference room, spreadsheets and slide decks were spread across the table, already opened on the large screen. Marissa moved with sharp, practiced motions as she pulled up a new file. "I'm assigning you the full risk exposure audit for Project Meridian," she said. "It needs to be completed within 48 hours. Janelle blinked. 48 hours? That audit is months behind schedule. We don't have full access to the original material yet. Marissa didn't flinch. "I know. But the partners want updated numbers, and I need someone reliable." She folded her arms. "That's you." Janelle opened the folder. There were missing tabs, incomplete datasets, and entire sections with blank spaces where calculations should have been. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just incomplete, it was fractured. Why wasn't the rest of the data archived? Janelle asked carefully. "It should be in the system," Marissa said with a shrug. "But if it's not, you'll have to work with what we have." Janelle held her expression steady. "I'll try. But this level of missing information creates risk. It's not just a simple update." Marissa leaned forward slightly. "Document everything. And loop Chris in if you need compliance support." That startled Janelle. Chris was new and still unfamiliar with half the systems. Why involve him on something this sensitive? The instruction didn't make sense, and the way Marissa said it felt like something was lurking beneath the surface, not a mistake, but a plan. Still, Janelle nodded. "I'll start now." Marissa closed the tablet and headed for the door. Just before stepping out, she paused and added, "Keep me updated. The partners will want explanations if anything looks unusual." Her tone suggested she already expected something unusual. She left the room with a trail of tension behind her. Janelle stood there for a moment, staring at the screen. Her instincts were too sharp to ignore. Something had been tampered with. Something wasn't aligning. And if this report appeared flawed, everyone would look to the person who prepared the final version. She whispered to herself, "This isn't right." Moving quickly, she sat at the head of the table and opened the audit folder again. She traced the document history, the metadata logs, the timestamp on the last update. Several entries were missing entirely, not moved or renamed, gone. Her stomach tightened again. She clicked through a second file. More gaps. Entire calculations deleted. Data ranges overwritten with zeros. These weren't errors. Someone had manually wiped out pieces of the project structure. And she knew exactly who had access at that level. Still, she didn't jump to conclusions. Janelle believed in facts, not assumptions. So she gathered the information silently, copying each compromised section into her notebook. She took screenshots of everything, incomplete formula sheets, broken links in the database, blank risk summaries. When she left the conference room an hour later, her notebook was full of red flags. Back at her desk, she opened the internal server logs. Her fingers moved fast across the keyboard, tracking version histories and user IDs. She didn't expect to find much. Server logs were usually cleaned regularly, but something unusual caught her eye almost immediately. A deletion record. Another. Several of them. All matching the timestamps from last week, and every single one connected to the same access point. Her heart sank, not out of fear, but clarity. It was Marissa's ID. The first seeds of sabotage were right there in front of her. Janelle leaned back in her chair for a moment, feeling the weight settle. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a busy manager overlooking something. This was intentional. Someone wanted the audit to collapse, and she was being placed at the center of that collapse. Outside the window, the bay reflected the muted afternoon light. Ferries moved slowly across the water, carrying people to the places they needed to be. Janelle watched them for a brief moment, grounding herself before turning back to her screen. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't careless. She wasn't going to let this unfold without understanding every detail. She whispered to herself again, "Document everything." Her resolve sharpened. The stakes had risen, and she felt the shift deeply. By late afternoon, she had already outlined the next steps: gather proof, verify timelines, handle the audit with precision, and stay ahead of whatever Marissa planned. The game had begun, and Janelle intended to stay 2 steps ahead. The soft buzz of fluorescent lights filled the quiet corner of Westbridge Consulting, where Janelle Carter had settled with her laptop and notebook. It was early, much earlier than most employees arrived. But after the assignment Marissa dumped on her, Janelle needed every minute she could carve out. The incomplete audit wasn't just missing pieces, it was riddled with holes that made no mathematical or logical sense. Something about it tugged at her instincts, urging her to look deeper. The building was mostly empty at this hour. Only a few early risers from accounting passed through the hallway, greeting her with brief nods. The quiet suited her. Truth often lived in silence, where distractions fell away and patterns had room to surface. She started with the server logs. The moment she logged into the internal database, a string of entries flashed across the screen. Janelle leaned forward, adjusting her glasses slightly. Most employees never bothered checking these logs. It wasn't part of their routine, but she knew how critical they could be. Every change made to audit files left a trace here. She scrolled slowly, line by line. At first, everything seemed normal. Timestamps from routine updates, autosaves triggered by software cycles, weekly backups. But then something caught her attention. A block of deletion records. Not edits, not corrections, deletions, and all within the same narrow time window. Janelle clicked on the first entry. User ID, MK line admin timestamp, 7:42 p.m. on the previous Thursday. Action, data batch removed. Her breath steadied. She scrolled again. 7:44 p.m., another deletion. 7:46 p.m., a third. 7:50 p.m., a series of formula wipes. It didn't end there. More entries appeared across Friday morning, all tied to the same user ID. She exhaled slowly. Why would anyone delete archived risk data? She whispered to herself. It was the kind of question that didn't have an innocent answer. Still, she refused to leap to conclusions. She believed in proof, solid, documented, and undeniable. So she clicked through each entry one at a time, cross-referencing them with the audit spreadsheets she had opened earlier. Each deleted line matched a missing portion of the report Marissa handed her yesterday. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had removed the original risk calculations, and they had done it right before assigning the audit to her. "Why me?" she murmured under her breath. A shadow crossed the frosted conference room glass. Janelle straightened instinctively. The door opened, and Marissa stepped inside, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. "You're in early," Marissa said, eyebrows raised as if she had stumbled upon something unexpected. "I wanted to get a head start," Janelle replied calmly. Marissa's eyes scanned the screen for a moment, lingering a little too long. "Good. We need this audit clean and quick. The partners want an update today." "Today?" Janelle asked, surprised. "I said it was urgent." Marissa clasped her hands behind her back. "If anything looks off, I expect you to resolve it. No delays, no excuses." The pressure in her voice tightened around the room like a rope being drawn. A subtle pressure, but unmistakable. Janelle nodded once. "I'll do my best." "I'm sure you will," Marissa answered before walking out, leaving the faint scent of her perfume hanging in the air. As soon as the door closed, Janelle pushed aside the uneasy feeling in her stomach. She turned back to the logs, taking notes in her leather notebook. Timestamps, file paths, user IDs, deleted ranges. Every detail mattered. When she reached another cluster of logs, something shifted in her understanding. The deletions didn't just erase data. They dismantled the foundation of the audit entirely. Anyone running the report now would see large gaps that made the numbers look risky and unbalanced. It would appear as though Janelle failed to gather complete information, or worse, mishandled it. Her jaw tightened. This wasn't incompetence. Someone wanted the audit to fall apart. Someone wanted her to be the face of that collapse. She sat back, absorbing the weight of her discovery. If she brought this up without evidence, it would sound like an accusation, one she couldn't afford to make lightly. But if she stayed silent, she'd be walking into a disaster designed to have her name printed at the bottom. She rubbed her forehead, feeling the beginnings of a long day ahead. The clock on her laptop struck 9:15. The rest of the office was now filling with noise, laughter, heels clicking down the hallway, keyboards tapping. Yet in the middle of all that normalcy, Janelle felt the pressure tightening around her like steel wires being pulled closer. She reopened the spreadsheet Marissa sent her, checking formulas and cross-referencing numbers. Missing, missing, missing. Every gap circled back to those logs. Her fingers moved quickly as she took more screenshots, adding them to a private folder she created on her desktop. She wasn't saving them out of fear. She was saving them because something inside her, something steady and unshakable, refused to let the truth slip away. A ping sounded on her phone. A reminder from her calendar, pick up new book for Lara. Janelle smiled faintly. Even on days like this, her daughter remained her grounding force. Taking a breath, she straightened her posture. Whatever this was, she would face it with clarity and calm. She wasn't impulsive. She wasn't reckless. She approached everything with structure and thought. And today, the pieces of truth were beginning to gather, small at first, like scraps, but enough to show her that something deliberate was taking shape around her, and she intended to understand every part of it. By lunchtime, the weight of the morning pressed heavily against Janelle's shoulders. The office buzzed with chatter as teams moved between meetings, but everything around her felt muted. The server logs replayed in her mind, each deletion marking a warning she couldn't ignore. She needed air, needed to step outside before the pressure drowned her thoughts. So she left her desk, grabbed her coat, and took the elevator down to the lobby. The revolving doors released her into cool Seattle air, the kind that carried the scent of damp pavement and roasted coffee from the cafe across the street. She breathed deeply. For 20 minutes she would step away from spreadsheets, missing data, and the tightening grip of Marissa's demands. A few blocks down, the small bookstore nestled between a bakery and a music shop caught her eye. Its red awning stretched over the entrance, the windows decorated with children's titles and art supplies. Janelle often stopped here for Lara, a tiny tradition she cherished, especially on days when work felt overwhelming. She stepped inside, and the soft bell above the door chimed. Warm light filled the shop, bouncing gently off wooden shelves. A clerk greeted her with a nod, and she made her way toward the children's section tucked along the back wall. Rows of colorful covers lined the shelves, each promising adventure or joy or a small lesson wrapped inside a story. Her eyes scanned the titles until one in particular stood out. Heroes of Integrity. The cover showed a group of everyday characters, a young inventor, a teacher, a quiet student standing up for a friend. Nothing grand, nothing exaggerated. Just ordinary people choosing truth, even when it cost them something. Janelle picked it up, flipping through the first few pages. The story that caught her attention followed a young inventor whose ideas were constantly taken by a coworker who spoke louder and claimed credit. Instead of fighting loudly, the inventor gathered proof, quietly, patiently, until the truth could stand on its own. Her chest tightened a little. It wasn't that she saw herself as a hero, but the situation felt close enough to resonate with her present struggle. The quiet worker overshadowed by someone with more visibility, someone who manipulated scenes to their advantage. The inventor in the story didn't lash out or crumble. They documented everything and held steady. Janelle closed her eyes briefly. The parallel felt almost too fitting. She looked back at the cover, thinking of Lara. Her daughter loved stories about courage, not loud bravery, but the kind where kindness and honesty outlasted challenges. It was why Janelle introduced her to books that taught values instead of just entertainment. She tucked the book under her arm and walked to the counter. The clerk rang it up, placing the book in a white paper bag. "For a little one?" he asked kindly. "Yes," Janelle answered with a gentle smile. "For my daughter. Looks like a good one," he said. "It is," she replied softly, "especially for days like this." As she stepped back outside, the mist had turned into a light drizzle. She pulled her coat closer and began the walk toward the office. Her mind replayed Lara's smiling face from last night, the drawing of the towering building with the playful slide on its side. Her daughter had no idea how much that drawing grounded her, how it reminded her that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered, quietly holding the line even when no one watched. On the sidewalk, she paused for a moment as a group of elementary students passed by, their teacher guiding them across the street. She smiled inwardly. Lara would be in class right now, probably working on another drawing or practicing vocabulary words. The thought lifted the corners of her lips slightly, softening the tension she'd carried since morning. Janelle crossed the street carefully and walked into a nearby cafe to pick up a small pastry for Lara, another ritual they shared. She placed it in her bag beside the book before heading back to Westbridge. With each step, she reminded herself why she fought so hard to do things the right way. It wasn't just for her career. It was for the example she set for her daughter. By the time she reached the building, she felt slightly lighter. She walked through the lobby, passing the revolving doors and nodding at the security guard. When she reached her floor, she noticed the energy had shifted. People moved with purpose as meetings resumed, and emails multiplied across inboxes. Janelle returned to her desk, setting the bookstore bag gently beside her monitor. She made a mental note to give the book to Lara tonight, to read it with her, to help her understand that truth wasn't just a word adults said. It was something we chose again and again. As she settled in, an email alert pinged on her screen. From Marissa, subject, update. Janelle swallowed, opening the message. Checking in. Need progress within the hour. She closed her eyes briefly, pressing her lips together. The pressure was back, sharp as ever. But now she carried something different, a reminder of why she needed to stay composed, why she needed to protect the truth even when it felt exhausting. She took one last glance at the bag holding the book. The cover peeked from the top, the young inventor standing with tools in hand, calm and ready. That was the person she intended to be, quiet, focused, unwavering. With a steady breath, she clicked open the audit report again. The traps were tightening. The holes in the data were more visible now, and the weight of Marissa's expectations pressed harder than ever. But Janelle didn't flinch. She was learning more every minute, gathering pieces she couldn't ignore, fragments that were slowly forming a path toward clarity. And even though the tension grew around her, she knew exactly who she was doing this for. Lara, who believed her mother could fix anything. Evan, who trusted her strength without interfering. And herself, because truth deserved a voice, even a quiet one. When the office began to settle into its afternoon rhythm, Janelle Carter returned to her desk with renewed focus. After her moment at the bookstore and the grounding thought of giving Lara her new storybook, she felt steadier. But steadiness didn't erase the task before her. It just made her approach sharper. She reopened the audit spreadsheets. The numbers glared back at her, fractured and inconsistent. Missing data wasn't uncommon in fast-moving projects, but this wasn't the random mess of busy deadlines. The empty spaces were too intentional, too carefully carved out. She clicked to the version history. The screen paused, loading the record logs, then finally displayed a long chronological list. Janelle scrolled slowly, scanning each line. Her fingers paused as she reached the entries from last week. A series of deletions appeared in red text. File version 16, deleted file version 17, deleted file version 18, deleted. Lines of missing pieces wiped out without cleanup, without explanation. The timing matched the server log deletions she'd already found earlier that morning. This was the confirmation she needed, a second layer of evidence showing that the numbers weren't missing naturally. Someone had cleared them out. She clicked open one of the deleted versions, hoping the system had saved a partial snapshot. The screen loaded fragments, old formulas, draft calculations, a few handwritten notes scanned into the document. Enough to show that the data once existed, enough to prove something was wrong with the current version. Her jaw tightened. Each piece she uncovered pointed in the same direction. Someone was removing the information she needed, then handing her an impossible task so she could be blamed for the fallout. She whispered under her breath, "This isn't just an oversight." She took a breath, steady and deliberate. This was the kind of discovery that required structure, not panic. Gather, organize, protect. Janelle created a private folder on her desktop, separate from the company's shared drives, a location only she could access. She named it something generic, nothing that would draw attention if anyone glanced over her shoulder. She began dragging in everything. Screenshots of the missing data version history logs, internal server entries timestamps, notes cross-referencing each deleted formula. Every detail mattered. Every piece formed part of the puzzle. Her method was meticulous, not because she wanted to accuse anyone, but because she refused to let unclear information destroy her credibility. Years of work, effort, and sacrifice weren't going to dissolve because someone else attempted to shift blame. She typed quickly, adding notes to a document summarizing her findings in clean, objective terms. No emotion, no speculation, just facts. Hard, traceable facts. As the office grew louder with afternoon chatter, she kept her attention locked on the screen, refusing to be pulled into distraction. A few coworkers passed behind her, but no one stopped to ask questions. To them, she looked like she always did, focused, calm, quietly carrying the weight of projects no one else wanted. When the clock reached 5:30, people began heading out, grabbing bags and water bottles on their way to the elevators. Laughter echoed faintly from the hallway. Janelle barely heard it. She was deep into structuring the folder when another missing version caught her attention. Version 14, version 15, both gone. Both erased cleanly. She clicked deeper into the system's archive. The fragments for version 14 loaded partially, but version 15 was blank, as though someone had cleared the file entirely. She narrowed her eyes. This wasn't sloppy sabotage. It was purposeful. Her stomach tightened again, not out of fear but out of clarity. She was staring at sabotage, piece by piece, and documenting every inch of it. The office was nearly empty when she finally logged out for the day. The sky outside had darkened. The reflections on the glass walls looked sharper as she walked toward the elevator. She held her notebook close, the evidence inside it growing heavier by the hour. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint laughter from Laura's bedroom, where she was practicing lines for her school play. Janelle sat at the dining table with her laptop open, her notes spread beside her. She pulled up the folder again, reviewing every piece she'd collected. Each screenshot marked a breadcrumb of truth she knew she would need. She was careful, deliberate, making sure every file was labeled with clear timestamps and descriptions. She wasn't preparing for a confrontation, not yet, but she was making sure that when the moment arrived, the truth would stand. Footsteps approached. Evan walked into the room holding a mug of herbal tea. His expression softened the moment he saw her posture. "You're still working?" he asked gently. Janelle rubbed her forehead. "Just going through the audit again. There's a lot missing." Evan set the mug beside her. "You've been at it since you got home." "I know." She exhaled, staring at the screen. "But I can't ignore this. The numbers don't disappear on their own." He pulled out a chair and sat beside her. "You look exhausted." "I'm fine," she insisted at first, but her voice softened almost instantly. "I just need to understand what's happening." Evan studied her quietly. He didn't rush her, didn't press her. He simply watched the shift in her eyes. The same look she had during final exams in college. The same look she had when she carried their daughter through the sleepless nights of infancy. The same look she had whenever she shouldered something heavy without wanting help. "You're holding a lot," he said softly. She let out a slow breath. "I know. Talk to me," he encouraged. She hesitated, then flipped the laptop slightly so he could see the folder. Someone erased versions of the audit. Not small errors, entire sections. Evan's brows lowered. "You're certain?" "I checked the version history. And the server logs." She met his eyes. It wasn't an accident. He didn't flinch, didn't jump to conclusions. He simply placed his hand over hers, steadying her. "Whatever this is, you're not facing it alone." Janelle looked at him with quiet gratitude. "I'm not asking you to intervene." "I know," he answered. "I'm not offering to fix it for you. I'm offering to stand with you while you fix it." Her shoulders relaxed for the first time all evening. She took the tea, holding the warm mug between her palms. Laura called from her bedroom, asking if they could read together soon. Janelle smiled faintly. "Go," Evan said softly. "You've done enough for tonight." She closed her laptop, but her resolve didn't dim. She had seen the first clear signs of sabotage, and she was ready to follow the truth wherever it led. By early Wednesday morning, the building at Westbridge Consulting felt different. It wasn't anything tangible, not the temperature of the office or the noise level of the halls. It was something underneath, the subtle tension that forms when the truth is beginning to take shape. Janelle Carter arrived earlier than usual, coat still damp from a light drizzle outside, her mind fixed on the pieces she uncovered the night before. Today, she needed answers. She powered on her computer, opened her private folder, and reviewed each screenshot she had taken. Deleted versions, missing formulas, fragmented data entries. She studied them all again, but something told her she had only scratched the surface. If the deletions were as coordinated as they seemed, the server logs would hold the missing link, the one connection she needed to confirm who accessed the files and when. She navigated to the restricted log interface and entered her credentials. The logs appeared in a scrolling column of numbers, actions, and user signatures. She adjusted the filters, narrowing the dates to the week Marissa assigned her the audit. The page refreshed. Her breath caught. Line after line displayed a pattern she could no longer ignore. January 14 to 6:58 p.m. MK line admin. File access. January 14th, 7:03 p.m. MK line admin. Modification. January 14th, 7:08 p.m. MK line admin. Deletion January 14th, 7:12 p.m. MK line admin. Deletion January 14th, 7:15 p.m. MK line admin. Batch removal. The timestamps formed a timeline as clear as a written confession. Her fingers hovered over the mouse as she scrolled farther. The pattern repeated on the following morning. a few minutes before Marissa had stopped by her desk with that calm but pointed expression. This was no oversight. This was deliberate. Janelle sat perfectly still, not frozen, not afraid, just processing. She had suspected it, felt it in her bones, but seeing the confirmation in black and white sent a coldness through her chest. Why would she do this? She whispered under her breath. She knew the answer without saying it out loud. Someone needed a scapegoat. Someone needed the audit to fall apart. Someone wanted her to take the blame, and someone felt threatened by her quiet competence. Her heart beat harder, not from panic, but from clarity. There came a moment in every storm when fear gave way to resolve. She felt that shift now, heavy and undeniable. A notification appeared at the corner of her screen. An email from Marissa. Subject, quick check-in. Come to my office. The timing almost made her laugh. Almost. She stood, notebook in hand, and made her way down the hallway. The carpet absorbed her footsteps, the early morning quiet amplifying every breath she took. When she reached Marissa's door, she knocked once. Come in, Marissa called. The office was tidy, minimalist, everything arranged with careful precision. Marissa sat behind her desk, stylus twirling lightly between her fingers. You're here early again, she said without looking up. Good. I need that audit moving quickly. Janelle kept her tone professional. I'm working through it. That's what I like to hear, Marissa replied, still not meeting her gaze. We can't afford any mistakes. The irony wasn't lost on her. Janelle nodded once. Understood. Marissa finally looked up, eyes sharp. Everything's clear in the files I gave you. A silence stretched, not hostile, but weighted. Janelle answered carefully. I'm documenting as I go. Some pieces aren't aligning with previous formats. Marissa's expression barely shifted. Well, that's the nature of an evolving project, she said lightly. Do your best with what you have. The message behind her tone was unmistakable. Don't question it. Don't dig. Don't push. But Janelle had already seen too much to pretend she didn't understand what was happening. After a few more exchanges, she left the office and returned to her desk. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat down, though her expression remained composed. She pulled up the logs again and traced the timeline from start to finish. Marissa wasn't just involved, she was the orchestrator of the missing data. And if the audit failed, the blame would fall squarely on her, the quiet analyst who never fought back. A soft pain pressed behind her eyes, but she blinked it away. This wasn't the moment to break down or question her worth. This was the moment to choose how she wanted the story to unfold. She stared at her notebook, the neat handwriting capturing every detail she had collected over the past 48 hours. Each line represented an effort to protect not just herself, but also the integrity she valued. Something in her shifted, the emotional turning point she didn't seek but needed. She whispered to herself, steady and calm, I'm not letting this happen. Not to her career, not to her family, not to herself. She sat straighter, rolled her shoulders back, and began drafting a clean, structured map of the evidence she'd collected. She wasn't preparing for a fight fueled by anger. She was preparing for one fueled by truth. And the truth always had a way of shining, even through deliberate shadows. As the office began to fill with coworkers, Janelle closed her notebook, her path clear for the first time since this ordeal began. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't bending. She had decided she would fight. That afternoon, after a long stretch of meetings and a silent lunch spent reviewing logs, Janelle left the office a few minutes early. She had promised Lara they would stop by the neighborhood library before heading home, and she needed that shift of scenery, a break from screens, numbers, and the heavy truth she was now carrying. The library sat just 3 blocks from their apartment, a warm, welcoming place with large windows and shelves arranged neatly around cozy reading nooks. When Janelle and Lara pushed through the doors, Jonas was already there, sitting cross-legged on the carpet near the children's section, matching puzzle pieces together with focused intensity. Lara, Jonas called, waving both arms. Lara sprinted toward him, her backpack bouncing with each step. Jonas, look what I brought. She pulled out a small stack of drawings, each one more colorful than the last, and spread them on the floor. Janelle smiled softly as she followed behind, the warmth of the library easing the tension that had been sitting at the base of her neck since morning. She took a seat at a nearby table, pulling out her notebook as the kids chatted excitedly. Jonas held up one of Lara's drawings. You made the slide bigger this time. That's because Mom needs a longer slide when her work is too much, Lara said matter-of-factly. She gets tired. Janelle's breath caught. It wasn't a dramatic statement. It wasn't even said with sadness. It was simply the truth through a child's eyes, honest, direct, unfiltered. And it landed harder than anything Marissa had said in the past week. She leaned back slightly, watching her daughter and Jonas rearrange crayons and papers across the carpet. Laura's laughter echoed softly between the bookshelves, bright and unburdened. It was a sound Janelle cherished, but knowing that her stress had reached Laura, even unintentionally, pushed something deep in her chest. Laura glanced up and waved. "Mom, come see this one." Janelle stood and walked over, kneeling beside her. Laura held up a new picture, this one showing Janelle standing at her office desk with a sun drawn above her head. "You put a sun inside the building?" Janelle asked, trying to smile. "Yes," Laura said proudly, "because even when you're working, I think you shine." The simplicity of those words nearly undid her. She brushed a hand over Laura's hair. "Thank you, baby." Jonas leaned in. "My mom says work makes people tired too," he added thoughtfully. "She drinks a lot of coffee." Laura laughed. "My mom just drinks tea." Janelle's smile grew a little wider. For a few minutes she sat with them, letting their innocent chatter fill the space in her mind that had been crowded with numbers and corrupted spreadsheets. But even as she tried to enjoy the moment, the morning logs kept replaying in her head, the timestamps, the deletions, the signature that tied everything to Marissa. Her shoulders tightened again. She stood and returned to the table, pulling out her notebook. Her pen hovered over the page, but she wasn't writing. She was thinking, deeply, quietly, carefully. How long had this been building behind her back? How much had Marissa erased before assigning her the audit? How many steps were taken with the intention of framing her? The swirling questions left a pressure on her chest, heavy enough that she needed to inhale slowly to steady her breath. "Mama," Laura's voice called gently from behind her. Janelle looked up. Laura had walked over, concern softening her features. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Janelle answered automatically, then softened her voice. "Just thinking about work." Laura stepped closer. "You don't have to fix everything alone," she said, repeating a phrase Evan often used. Janelle's expression melted. "Where did you hear that?" "You and Daddy say it to each other." Laura shrugged. "So, it must be true." Janelle felt her throat tighten. The wisdom children carried without realizing it often surprised her, but today it felt like an anchor, something steady to hold on to. She drew Laura into a gentle hug. "Thank you, sweetheart." Laura hugged her back tightly before returning to the carpet, Jonas immediately showing her another drawing. Their voices merged into playful chatter again, and the comforting noise filled the space around them. Janelle sat a moment longer, letting the emotions she usually held tightly slip through the cracks. The exhaustion, the frustration, the betrayal. She didn't show it on her face, but inside, a storm had been building all week. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered for a moment before she typed, "Might need backup tomorrow." She stared at the message, heart beating steadily. It wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't a surrender. It was a signal, a quiet acknowledgement that something was unfolding beyond her control, and she needed someone she trusted completely to be aware. She hit send. A few seconds later, her phone buzzed. "Evan, I'm right here. Whatever you need." She swallowed hard, the simple message grounding her. She wasn't alone. Even if she chose to fight this battle professionally and independently, she wasn't alone. She returned the phone to her bag and glanced at Laura again. Her daughter was now sprawled across the floor, coloring the outline of a tall building with bright orange and yellow markers. Jonas added little stars around the roof. "Look, Mom." Laura called. "This one has fireworks because good days deserve fireworks." Janelle's chest warmed. She nodded. "That's beautiful." And then she whispered quietly to herself, "There will be good days again." The library's gentle quiet, the innocent joy of the children, and the soft reassurance from Evan's message blended together, giving her a moment of clarity. What she was facing wasn't just sabotage. It was a test of her strength, her integrity, her resilience. And she intended to rise to it, not for recognition or pride, but for the people who looked at her with trust and love, especially Laura. As the children gathered their things and the librarian announced the library's closing time, Janelle helped Laura into her jacket. They walked hand in hand toward the exit, stepping into the cool Seattle evening. The truth was tightening around her, but so was her resolve. Later that night, after Laura had changed into pajamas and curled up on the couch with a blanket, Janelle sat beside her reading Heroes of Integrity. Lara listened with bright, attentive eyes, reacting to each challenge the young inventor faced. By the time they reached the midpoint of the story, her head rested lightly on Janelle's arm. Evan watched from the hallway, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely. He could tell Janelle's mind was still processing everything beneath her calm exterior. When the story ended and Lara drifted toward sleep, he walked into the room. "You should rest soon, too," he murmured. "I will," she replied, though it was clear she wouldn't. Not yet. He offered a small smile, kissed her forehead, and stepped away. "I'll be in the office for a few minutes." She nodded, appreciating the space. Evan entered their small home office, closing the door halfway. The room held the soft glow of a desk lamp, illuminating papers, books, and his laptop. He rolled his sleeves up and powered the device on. The message she'd sent earlier lingered in his mind. Might need backup tomorrow. She rarely asked for anything. That alone was enough to push him into quiet action. He wasn't going to intervene recklessly. He respected her independence too deeply for that. But he was going to understand the bigger picture. Because if someone was threatening the stability Janelle had built for herself, he needed to know who they were and what they had access to. Once his laptop loaded, he opened a secure portal connected to industry records and business filings. As a partner in private equity, he had access to databases that weren't open to the average Seattle resident, and he knew exactly where to look. He typed, Alpha Tier LLC. The name had been whispered to him days earlier during a casual conversation with a colleague, someone hinting at a shell company used by a firm employee to move sensitive data around. At the time, Evan didn't think much of it. Whispers floated around financial circles constantly. But now he needed clarity. The search returned limited public information, a small office address with no staff listed, no website, and minimal financial activity. That alone was suspicious. He clicked deeper, navigating through layers of filings most people didn't know how to interpret. Alpha Tier appeared in 3 project transactions, including one tied to Westbridge Consulting. He frowned. Why would a consulting firm funnel anything through a shell entity? He muttered. Another click revealed something more concerning. 2 weeks ago, Alpha Tier received a data package associated with Project Meridian, the same project Janelle was currently auditing. The transfer was logged through an external proxy, but the signature authorized it. Evan's jaw tightened as the file loaded. Authorized by M.K. Leynadman Marissa. He sat back slowly, the weight of the realization settling across his shoulders. If Marissa had used Alpha Tier to remove or relocate sensitive data, then the missing files Janelle was uncovering weren't an accident or internal glitch. They were part of a pattern, a deliberate pattern. A quiet exhale escaped him. This wasn't incompetence. This was a calculated maneuver. Someone was deliberately stripping information out of the audit trail and funneling it through an off-site channel. And then that same someone handed the compromised materials to Janelle, forcing her into a trap designed to implode. Evan scrubbed a hand across his face, steadying himself. His instinct was to protect, to barge into the situation and put an immediate stop to it. But that wasn't what Janelle wanted. She wanted to prove her strength on her own terms. He respected her resilience too much to overshadow it. But protecting her didn't mean stepping into the spotlight. It meant moving quietly on the edges, gathering the pieces she might need later, creating a buffer before things spiraled beyond her control, and understanding the enemy before they struck again. He opened another encrypted channel and began collecting data. Alpha Tier's registration transaction logs, authorization signatures, transfer timestamps, any connection tying the entity back to Westbridge. He compiled everything into a secured folder on his laptop. Each file added another layer of clarity and another layer of anger, but he kept his expression calm. Anger didn't help Janelle. Truth did. After 40 minutes of searching, he closed his laptop gently and leaned back in the chair. His eyes softened as he thought of her, the way she held everything together, the weight she carried without complaint, the quiet strength she embodied even when people underestimated her. He stood, stretching his arms, before walking toward the living room. Janelle sat alone now, the book closed beside her. She stared at the dark window, lost in thought. He approached silently and sat next to her. "Lara asleep?" "Drifting," she replied softly. He studied her profile, the calm, determined line of her jaw, the weariness in her eyes. "You've been holding a lot," he said gently. "I'm managing," she replied. "I know," he said quietly. "But I want you to know, I took a look at something. Alpha Tier LLC." Her head turned sharply. "You did?" He nodded. I didn't interfere in anything involving Westbridge. I didn't contact anyone. But I needed to understand what you're up against. He hesitated before continuing. Marissa used it to move data. Janelle inhaled slowly, absorbing the confirmation of what she suspected. So the missing files, they weren't lost. They were transferred. Yes, Evan said carefully. And that suggests a motive. She closed her eyes, not in defeat, but in thought. When she opened them again, a steadier resolve settled into place. Thank you, she murmured. He took her hand, squeezing it gently. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm behind you, always. But I will follow your lead. A faint smile curved her lips, small, tired, but grateful. That means everything, she whispered. He kissed her forehead, letting the moment sit between them. A moment of unity, calm, and shared purpose. The storm around her was building, but she now had 3 anchors: her daughter's innocence, her own integrity, and Evan's unwavering support. Tomorrow would demand strength. Tomorrow would demand clarity. Tomorrow might change everything. But tonight, she allowed herself to breathe. The next morning arrived with a heaviness that settled deep in Janelle's chest. She stepped into Westbridge Consulting wearing the same quiet determination she carried all week, but today had a different energy. Today was the executive review, the meeting that would determine whether the trap Marissa set would snap shut or snap back. The elevator pinged as it opened onto the 12th floor. A cluster of employees gathered near the conference wing, voices low, glances shifting. Janelle felt their eyes trailing her as she walked by, not unkind but curious. Rumors often traveled faster than facts at Westbridge, and the sudden urgent review had everyone wondering who was under scrutiny. Her heels clicked steadily along the hallway, a rhythm that matched her steady breathing. She carried her notebook, her laptop, and the private folder she'd built over the past 2 days. Everything she needed was inside. She reached the conference room. The door was already open. Inside, the air felt thick, not with temperature but with tension. The long, polished table gleamed under the recessed lighting. At the far end, the CEO sat with 2 senior partners. One tapped a pen. Another whispered to her neighbor. A representative from compliance reviewed paperwork beside him. Marissa stood near the presentation screen, perfectly composed in her navy suit. She caught sight of Janelle and offered a tight, controlled smile. "Morning, Janelle," she said, voice smooth. "Good morning," Janelle replied evenly. Marissa gestured to the empty chair beside her. "You'll sit here. You may need to answer for some of the inconsistencies in the audit. The subtle emphasis on you wasn't lost on anyone." Janelle took her seat, laying her notebook neatly before her. She kept her expression neutral, though her pulse beat steadily beneath her calm exterior. More executives filed in, murmuring quietly. Papers shifted. The sound of chairs sliding into place echoed against the walls. The CEO cleared his throat. "Let's begin." Marissa stepped forward with practiced grace, hands clasped lightly. "Thank you all for making time on short notice. As you know, Project Meridian's audit has shown troubling gaps. Our risk exposure appears significantly higher than projected, and internal review suggests the responsible party may have failed to maintain accurate records." Several heads turned toward Janelle. Marissa continued, "The audit data we received was incomplete, and the results we compiled show critical sections missing. This level of oversight raises concerns about the handling of sensitive information." The implication hovered in the air like a suspended blade. Janelle waited. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend. Not yet. Marissa clicked to the first slide, a chart riddled with gaps. "These are the inconsistencies that were delivered to me. As you can see, the missing values make the risk assessment unstable and—" The door opened. Every head turned. Evan Duane stepped inside. The room froze. Executives exchanged stunned glances. The CEO straightened in his chair. The compliance representative's pen stopped mid-motion. Even Marissa faltered for half a second, her confidence flickering before she regained her composure. No one expected him here. Evan gave a polite nod. "Apologies for the interruption. I was invited to observe." His voice was calm, smooth, and carried an authority that didn't need raising. The CEO gestured. "Mr. Duane, please join us." Janelle felt a tightness in her chest release just slightly, not because she needed rescue, but because she wasn't alone in the storm. Evan took a seat near the back, silent, observant, blending professionalism with quiet vigilance. Marissa cleared her throat and tried to recover her momentum. "As I was saying, These inconsistencies indicate a failure to maintain proper data. May I ask a question? One of the partners interrupted. Marissa hesitated. Of course. When you say delivered to me, do you mean the data was already incomplete when you received it? Yes, Marissa answered quickly. That is correct. Another partner turned to Janelle. Is that accurate? Marissa answered before Janelle could speak. I personally confirmed the state of the files upon receipt. A small lie wrapped in confident tone. Janelle lowered her eyes briefly, collecting herself. She didn't need to interrupt. Her moment was coming. The CEO leaned back. Marissa, we'll allow Janelle to respond shortly. Continue. Marissa clicked through more slides. Given the urgency of the audit, I assigned Janelle to complete the missing calculations. Unfortunately, the missing data was too substantial to reconcile. Again, eyes drifted toward Janelle. She felt their weight, but didn't flinch. Marissa continued. Based on the results, we believe the audit process may have been mishandled, leading to risk misclassification. A soft voice broke the room's rhythm. Do you have timestamps for when these incomplete files were verified? It was Evan. The executives turned again. Marissa stiffened. I didn't bring timestamps. The gaps speak for themselves. Janelle observed the subtle shift in body language among the executives. Doubt, curiosity, suspicion. Evan didn't say another word. He simply leaned back, hands folded lightly, expression unreadable. But his question had done exactly what it needed to, created a crack in Marissa's narrative. Janelle sat a little straighter. The CEO cleared his throat again. Thank you, Marissa. In a moment, we'll hear from Janelle. Marissa nodded, stepping aside, but the tension in her shoulders revealed that she felt the shift too. The room grew silent. The stakes hung thick in the air. Janelle closed her notebook gently and prepared herself. Her moment, the moment she never wanted but was now ready for, had arrived. The CEO folded his hands and looked toward Janelle. Thank you for your patience. You may respond now. Janelle rose slowly, smoothing the front of her blouse. She didn't rush, didn't fidget, didn't show fear. She moved with the quiet composure that had carried her through every test in her career. Thank you, she said softly. The room fell silent. She connected her laptop to the presentation screen. The soft click of the HDMI cable echoed like a set of footsteps in an empty hallway. Her hands were steady, but inside, she felt the weight of everything she was about to expose. Her first slide appeared, a clean timeline of data access logs. I'd like to begin, she said calmly, by clarifying what actually happened to the audit files. What we're looking at is not a case of incomplete data being delivered to management. This is a case of completed data being removed. A ripple moved across the room, subtle but undeniable. Janelle continued. Over the last 48 hours, I documented every change, every entry, and every deletion affecting the audit. She clicked the next slide. These are the server logs for January 14th. Timestamps appeared in neat rows. 6:58 p.m. File access. MK Line Admin 7:03 p.m. Modification. MK Line Admin 7:08 p.m. Deletion. MK Line Admin 7:12 p.m. Deletion. MK Line Admin 7:15 p.m. Batch removal. MK Line Admin. Several executives leaned forward. Janelle pointed gently to the entries. These logs show that a fully compiled dataset, one that had been archived and approved, was accessed and altered. Entire sections weren't missed or forgotten. They were erased. Marissa stiffened beside her, fingers tightening on her stylus. Another slide appeared, side-by-side screenshots. Left side, a complete version of the report from 2 weeks ago. Right side, the version Marissa handed to her. Entire columns gone. Formulas overwritten. Risk categories stripped out. This version, Janelle explained, is the file I received, but the version on the left is what existed before the deletions. A long silence filled the room. One of the partners finally asked, "How did you obtain the earlier version?" Janelle answered without hesitation, "I reviewed the audit tool's version history. Some records were missing, but fragments remained in the archive, enough to show what changed." She clicked again. The screen now displayed her screen capture recordings, time-stamped videos showing formulas disappearing, cells flattening, and entire sections vanishing. Executives watched as rows were wiped clean in seconds. This recording was captured directly from the audit tool's logs, Janelle said. The system stores partial snapshots, even when full versions are deleted. Another partner cleared his throat. You're saying the deletions were manual? Yes, she replied. Manual, precise, and carried out under one access signature. She turned toward the compliance officer. I cross-checked the signature with the company's internal database. It belongs to the administrator account assigned to Marissa. The compliance officer blinked, lips parting slightly, stunned by the clarity of the evidence. Marissa stepped forward, voice tightening. With respect, Janelle, you're misinterpreting. The CEO raised his hand sharply. Let her finish. Marissa fell silent. Janelle continued. If the audit had gone forward without clarification, the project's risk would have been misreported, and the person blamed would have been me, the individual assigned to fix the missing pieces. A senior partner spoke up. How did you verify that the deletions happened before the assignment was given to you? Janelle switched slides again. A final chart appeared. Assignment timestamp, 9:12 a.m. Last deletion timestamp, 7:15 p.m. the night before. This shows, she said steadily, that the data was removed hours before I was asked to complete the report. Not after, not during. Before. Whispers spread across the room like a wave. Janelle didn't react. She simply stood tall, hands clasped loosely in front of her. Now, she said, turning to the compliance representative, I'd like to ask Chris to confirm whether the data had been intact when he last accessed it. Chris looked startled but nodded. He cleared his throat nervously. Yes, I can confirm that. When Marissa and I met on the 13th, the files were complete. There were no missing sections. The records were stable. The CEO stared at him. You're certain? Absolutely, Chris replied. I wouldn't have signed the preliminary compliance clearance otherwise. A thick, heavy silence followed. The kind of silence that ends careers. The kind of silence that exposes truth with no need for dramatic gestures. Janelle finally closed her laptop. That concludes my explanation. She sat down gently, her pulse steady now, not triumphant, not emotional, just grounded, exactly as she needed to be. Across the room, Marissa's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time, she no longer controlled the narrative. The CEO leaned forward, elbows on the table. His eyes were sharp, unwavering. Marissa, he said slowly, would you like to explain these discrepancies? Marissa swallowed. Her usual confidence had cracked. Those logs, I don't know how accurate they are. This feels like a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? One partner repeated, disbelief clear. Another spoke firmly. The logs match the version deletions, the missing data, and the timeline. That is not a misunderstanding. That is deliberate action. The compliance representative set down his pen. This is serious, very serious. Evan hadn't said a word since his question earlier, but his silence carried weight, a reminder that someone in the room now understood the broader implications of data manipulation. The CEO exhaled slowly, controlled but disappointed. We will pause here, he said. There are findings that require internal review. His tone left no mystery about how damaging those findings were. Marissa lowered her eyes. Betrayal was no longer an allegation. It was visible, documented, undeniable. And for the first time in days, Janelle felt something lift inside her. Not joy, not vindication, just truth. Finally, the truth was in the open. The room stayed frozen in the aftermath of Janelle's presentation. Papers lay untouched, screens dimmed, and the tension that once hovered in the background had now settled in plain sight. No one breathed for several seconds, as though the truth Janelle revealed needed space to echo across every corner of the conference room. The CEO sat back slowly, expression unreadable, but the slight narrowing of his eyes revealed the weight of his thoughts. He interlaced his fingers, elbows on the table, gaze fixed directly on Marissa. Explain, he said quietly, the kind of quiet that carried more force than raised voices. Marissa swallowed hard. Sir, I believe there's been a misinterpretation of my actions. I received incomplete files and simply did what I could with what was available. Janelle didn't speak. She didn't move. Her composure stayed intact, hands folded on her notebook, eyes steady. She had said what she needed to say. The truth was doing the rest. The compliance representative shook his head slowly. That doesn't align with the logs. These aren't small edits. These are large-scale deletions. One of the senior partners turned toward Janelle. How long did it take you to gather all this documentation? 2 days, she replied softly. And several late nights. He nodded, impressed. Your work is thorough. Marissa's eyes flicked to him sharply, the first sign of panic breaking through the surface. The CEO reached into a folder beside him and withdrew a document, crisp paper clipped in the corner. He tapped it twice with his finger before laying it on the table. Janelle recognized it immediately. Her termination letter. The same document that had been prepared behind her back, waiting for today's meeting to justify its existence. The CEO slid it toward Marissa. This, he said, was drafted based on the understanding that Janelle had mishandled the audit. Marissa's complexion turned pale. He continued, but today's presentation contradicts every justification written here. The room remained painfully still. The CEO lifted the letter again, holding it between two fingers. It appears, he said with a firm calmness, that this action was premature, and based on incorrect or manipulated information, he set the letter aside, away from Janelle, away from its intended purpose. The symbolic weight of that gesture struck every person in the room. Marissa's voice trembled slightly. Sir, I don't think this is fair. I have been loyal to this firm for years. I only acted based on— Tell me, the CEO interrupted. What reason would you have for deleting documented risk assessments? I didn't. The logs say otherwise. Marissa opened her mouth again, but no coherent words formed. Her gaze darted around the room as if searching for support, but the faces surrounding her were stone. Even the senior partner who had previously supported her now held back, weighed down by the unmistakable clarity of the evidence. Finally, her shoulders slumped, not in admission, but in defeat. The CEO turned to Janelle. You handled yourself professionally and presented factual, verifiable information. You acted with integrity throughout this entire review. Janelle nodded respectfully. Thank you, sir. Evan remained silent, seated in the corner, but his eyes were trained on the CEO, steady, watchful. He wasn't there to overpower the moment. He was there to ensure fairness wasn't overshadowed by internal politics. The CEO glanced toward him briefly. Mr. Duane, thank you for joining us. Your presence underscores how serious this situation has become. Evan inclined his head. I'm simply here to support the truth. He didn't push the narrative. He didn't insert himself. He chose exactly the words that upheld Janelle without stepping into her light. The CEO nodded once before returning his attention to the room. Given the severity of these findings, disciplinary action may be necessary, but we will not make a final decision today. His voice steadied with controlled authority. This requires a full internal review. Effective immediately, a senior partner added, and until that review is complete, the termination letter is void. The word void struck hard. Janelle exhaled. Not a dramatic sigh, not a gasp of relief, just a subtle release of tension she had held tightly for too long. The CEO placed the termination letter back into the folder, closing it with finality. We cannot, and will not, discipline an employee for someone else's actions. Marissa's eyes widened, a flicker of fear slicing through her controlled facade. While we review this matter, the CEO continued, Janelle will step back from the audit and instead support the operations team on related tasks. We want her expertise, but we also want her protected from further complications. The subtle message was clear. They no longer trusted Marissa with proximity to Janelle. The meeting drew to its natural close. Executives gathered their papers, compliance murmured about next steps, and chairs slid back into place with soft sounds. One by one, people filed out with hushed conversations and stunned expressions. As the room emptied, Evan approached Janelle quietly. You did incredible, he said in a low voice meant only for her. She looked up at him, eyes warm but tired. I just told the truth. He smiled gently. Sometimes that's the bravest part. She closed her laptop and gathered her notebook slowly. It's not over yet. No, he said, brushing his thumb lightly across her knuckles. But today changed everything. Behind them, the CEO paused at the door. Janelle? She turned. We'll speak again soon, but for now, go home, rest. You've earned it. She nodded. Thank you. When the last person stepped out, the room stood silent again, but no longer suffocating. The termination letter meant to end her story now lay buried beneath the truth she had brought into the light, and the direction was clear. Janelle was not the one at fault. She never had been. The apartment felt unusually quiet when Janelle stepped inside that evening. It wasn't silence in the heavy sense. It was the kind of stillness that comes after a long storm, when the clouds haven't fully cleared, but the thunder has finally stopped. She set her bag down by the doorway, letting out a slow breath she had been holding since the meeting ended. Her entire body felt lighter yet drained, as though the truth she carried had taken strength to reveal, but returned something back to her in the process. Evan emerged from the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, dish towel over his shoulder. "Hey," he said softly. "I made dinner. Figured you wouldn't want to think about cooking tonight." Janelle smiled faintly, grateful in a way she couldn't put into words. "You figured right." He stepped closer, hands sliding gently around her waist. "How are you holding up?" She leaned into him, closing her eyes. Tired, relieved, still processing everything. A soft breath left her. "But I'm okay." Evan kissed her forehead. "You should be proud of yourself." "I'm proud that the truth finally came out," she whispered. "Not proud of the situation, but proud I didn't break." "You didn't just avoid breaking," Evan said quietly. "You held the room together." Before she could reply, small footsteps pattered down the hallway. "Mom." Laura ran toward her, arms open wide. Janelle bent down just in time to catch her in a warm hug. "How was your day?" Janelle asked, smoothing a hand over her daughter's braid. "It was good," Laura said, "but I was waiting for you." "Did the big meeting make you late?" Janelle and Evan exchanged a soft glance. "Yes, sweetheart," she said gently. "It was a very important meeting today." Laura stepped back and studied her mother's face with curious seriousness. "Did everyone finally see the truth?" Janelle froze for a moment. Children never needed the full explanation. Somehow they always understood the heart of things. She knelt in front of Lara. "What makes you ask that?" Lara shrugged. "Because you said the truth is like a lamp. It always shines when everything else is dark." She lifted one hand and mimicked a tiny flicker. "So I just wondered if today was the day your lamp turned on." Janelle's throat tightened. Evan smiled from behind them, eyes softening. "I think her lamp turned into a spotlight." Lara giggled. Janelle pulled her close again, hugging her tightly. "Yes, baby. People did see the truth today." Lara beamed proudly, the kind of innocent joy that reminded Janelle why she fought so hard, not just for her career, but for the example she left in her daughter's world. They moved to the dinner table, where grilled chicken, rice, and roasted vegetables waited. Evan pulled out chairs for them, and the three of them sat together, the warm light casting a gentle glow across the room. "So," Evan began as they ate, "how did the rest of the meeting go after they reviewed the evidence?" Janelle rested her fork for a moment. "They didn't finalize anything today. The CEO said they needed an internal review, but he voided the termination completely." She exhaled. "The letter that was meant for me, it won't be used." Lara's eyes widened. "Someone was going to take your job?" The question stabbed lightly at Janelle. She didn't want her daughter to carry that stress. She shook her head softly. "Someone made a mistake, and it looked like I did something wrong, but today everyone saw what really happened." "Oh." Lara nodded, her mind working through the explanation. "So the truth came out from hiding." "It did," Janelle said with a warm smile. Lara puffed her chest proudly. "I knew it would." "Truth is brave." Evan laughed gently. "Where does she get this wisdom?" Janelle smiled. "Mostly from the stories we read." She reached across the table and squeezed Lara's hand. "And maybe a little from being amazing." Dinner continued with light conversation. Lara's art club, Evan's meeting earlier, Janelle's recounting of the shocked faces in the conference room. For the first time all week, she felt the tension in her shoulders ease. After they finished eating, Lara brought out her crayons and paper. "I want to draw something for you, Mom." Janelle and Evan settled on the couch as Lara spread her supplies across the rug. She drew a small figure at a desk, surrounded by tall buildings, with a bright yellow circle above her head. "That's you," Lara said, pointing. "And the circle?" Janelle asked. "My lamp," Lara answered. "Because even if someone tries to cover it, it still shines." Janelle swallowed hard, emotion rising but gentle. "It's beautiful." Evan slipped an arm around her shoulders. "She's learning from the best." Lara continued coloring, humming softly. The room felt peaceful, finally, deeply peaceful. The storm at work wasn't gone, but the worst of it had broken. Now, what remained was healing, rebuilding, and stepping into whatever came next. Janelle leaned into Evan's side. "Today was hard, I know," he murmured, "but it showed me something." "What's that?" "That quiet strength doesn't mean staying silent. It means holding steady until the moment comes to speak. Evan kissed her temple. And when your moment came, you didn't just speak, you stood. Lara looked up. Of course she stood. That's what heroes do. Janelle smiled through a soft breath. I'm no hero. To her, you always will be, Evan whispered. As evening settled into night, the small family curled together on the couch, wrapped in warmth and calm. The turmoil of the past week softened in the background, replaced by something stronger: clarity, unity, peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges at Westbridge. But tonight, Janelle allowed herself to rest in the truth she fought so hard to bring forward. The truth that now finally belonged to the light. The next morning, Seattle's skyline glowed with a soft, early light as Janelle walked into Westbridge Consulting. The building felt different today, not lighter, but steadier, as if the truth revealed yesterday had quietly rearranged the atmosphere. When she stepped into the lobby, the receptionist gave her a quick nod, almost relieved. People who normally rushed past her now greeted her with more warmth than usual, small smiles, small acknowledgments. News traveled fast. Not the official news. Westbridge would never leak internal matters, but people knew. They sensed when a narrative shifted. And yesterday, the shift had been seismic. Janelle took the elevator to the 12th floor. The doors opened to a hallway buzzing softly with early conversations. She headed toward her desk, passing coworkers who paused mid-sentence to glance her way. Some looked admiring, some curious, some simply respectful. She didn't linger on any of it. She wasn't here to bask in attention. She was here to continue her work with the same quiet integrity she brought every day. As she settled into her chair, powering on her computer, a message popped up on her screen: CEO requesting you in his office at 9:15 a.m. Her heart moved once, firmly, but she stayed calm. She reviewed her notes, took a sip of water, and prepared herself. When the time arrived, she walked down the hall, heels tapping in a steady rhythm. She knocked lightly. "Come in," the CEO said. She stepped inside. 2 senior partners were present as well, seated across from the desk. The atmosphere was formal, but not tense. "Good morning, Janelle," the CEO said warmly. "Thank you for coming." She nodded. "Of course. Please sit." She took her seat, hands resting on her lap, composed and ready. The CEO exchanged a brief glance with the partners before speaking again. "After yesterday's review, we spent several hours evaluating our internal processes and the evidence you provided." Janelle nodded slightly, encouraging him to continue. "It became clear," one of the partners added, "that the audit discrepancies were not due to your actions but to unauthorized interference." The other partner leaned forward. "Your work was meticulous, thorough. You protected the firm from a potentially serious error." The CEO folded his hands. "And we want to acknowledge that properly." A soft breath escaped her, but not visibly. Internally, he continued, "As of this morning, Marissa has submitted her resignation." Janelle blinked. She had expected consequences, but not so quickly. "It was her decision," the CEO clarified. "Given the findings, she felt it was best for the firm and for herself." A quiet stillness settled in Janelle's chest. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Something gentler, closure. She nodded once. "I see." "We called you here," the CEO said, "to discuss your role moving forward." The senior partner slid a folder across the desk toward her. Inside is an offer to step into a newly created position, Director of Operational Integrity. Her breath caught, just slightly. The CEO smiled. "A position designed with you in mind. It reflects the responsibilities you've already been handling, unofficially, for quite some time." Janelle opened the folder slowly. The title stared back at her, crisp and bold: Director of Operational Integrity. Westbridge Consulting. A mixture of disbelief and quiet pride warmed her chest. The CEO continued, "Your ability to organize complex systems, identify discrepancies, and maintain professionalism under pressure is exceptional. The partners agree that your leadership in this role would strengthen our operational structure." Another partner added, "Frankly, we should have recognized your contributions sooner." The words settled over her like a gentle weight, heavy only because they carried long overdue recognition. She finally spoke. "Thank you, truly. I appreciate the opportunity and the trust." "It's earned," the CEO said. "Every bit of it. We'd like you to begin transitioning into the role as early as next week," the senior partner added. We'll provide additional resources, and you'll have full visibility of interdepartmental operations. Full visibility, a level of authority she had never been given before, but had quietly upheld anyway. She nodded. I'm ready. A genuine smile formed on the CEO's face. Good. There will be challenges, but I have no doubt you'll navigate them with the same clarity you showed yesterday. The meeting concluded with firm handshakes and warm expressions. As she stepped into the hallway, she allowed herself a small breath, one she had been saving for months. She walked back to her desk with measured calm. A few co-workers glanced her way, and though she didn't announce anything, they sensed something had changed. Her phone buzzed. A message from Evan. How did the meeting go? She typed back. Good news. We'll tell you at home. As she returned to her work, Chris approached her desk hesitantly. Hey, Janelle? She turned toward him. Hi, Chris. He rubbed the back of his neck. I just wanted to say thank you for showing the real timeline. I didn't realize, until yesterday, how much pressure you were under. Janelle offered a kind smile. Thank you, Chris. You helped by confirming the truth. He nodded, relieved. Well, congratulations. Everyone's talking, but I figured you should hear it from me too. Thank you, she repeated genuinely. He walked off, looking lighter than he had in weeks. Later in the afternoon, one of the senior partners sent her a brief message. Your presentation yesterday was a masterclass. We are fortunate to have you. Janelle stared at the screen for a moment before closing the message gently. She didn't need applause. She didn't crave attention. She valued alignment, trust, and clarity, and for the first time in a long while she felt seen in all the right ways. As the day went on, she gathered her belongings slowly, taking one final look at her desk before heading home. Tomorrow, she would step into a new chapter. But today was the day Westbridge finally saw who she had always been. And for the first time, her story wasn't overshadowed. It was recognized. Friday afternoon arrived with a gentle brightness, the kind that made the Seattle air feel soft and forgiving. When Janelle signed out of Westbridge for the week, she didn't rush. She moved with a sense of grounding she hadn't felt in a long time. Her steps were steady, measured, not from exhaustion but from clarity. Her first week stepping into the new role officially hadn't started yet, but she already felt the shift begin. Partners greeted her with respect that wasn't forced. Colleagues looked at her as someone whose work carried weight, because it did. The shadows that had stretched over her desk for months had finally lifted. As she exited the building, her phone buzzed with a message from Evan. Meet us at the park? A smile warmed her face. She texted back, on my way. She walked toward the nearby parking garage, the gentle hum of afternoon activity surrounding her. When she reached her car, she paused, taking a moment to breathe in the sense of change. Her job wasn't her identity, but her integrity. That was something she carried everywhere. She drove toward the park in Capitol Hill, the one where Laura loved to chase the breeze with her bright-colored kites. Families filled the sidewalks, children holding balloons, dogs tugging their leashes with happy determination. It felt like the perfect place to end a long, transformative week. When Janelle arrived, she spotted Evan pushing Lara on the swings. Lara's laughter floated across the playground, a sound that always warmed Janelle more than any accomplishment at work ever could. She walked toward them slowly, letting the moment settle into her heart. Mom, Lara caught sight of her mid-swing. You're here. Janelle opened her arms as Lara jumped off and ran to her. Hey, sweetheart, she said, lifting her slightly. I missed you today. I missed you too, Lara said, leaning her cheek against her mother's shoulder. Did you have a good day? Janelle smiled. I had a very good day. Evan approached with his calm, familiar presence. You look at peace, he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. I feel at peace, she replied. They walked together to a bench near the playground. Other families mingled nearby, laughter and conversation mixing with the distant sounds of skateboards rolling down smooth paths. Janelle let the environment wash over her, giving her space for reflection. So, Evan said gently, they announced anything yet? They finalized everything this afternoon. Her gaze softened. It's official. I start as Director of Operational Integrity next week. Evan smiled proudly. That's exactly where you belong. Lara looked up with wide eyes. Director, that means you're the boss now? Janelle laughed softly. Not the boss, baby, but I help make things work the right way. That's kind of like being a boss, Lara insisted. Janelle kissed her forehead. Maybe a little. They sat for a moment watching the sun cast color across the sky. The clouds glowed with hints of orange and soft gold. The city around them moved at its usual pace, but for the three of them, time felt slower, as if the universe had paused just enough for them to breathe in the ending of one chapter and the beginning of another. After a few minutes, Lara tugged on her mother's hand. "Can we draw something together?" Janelle nodded immediately. "Of course." They laid a small blanket on the grass while Evan unpacked a sketch pad and a pencil set from Lara's backpack. The three of them settled onto the blanket, the cool grass beneath them and the mellow warmth of the setting sun brushing their shoulders. "What should we draw today?" Janelle asked. Lara tapped the pencil against her chin. "The skyline again. But this time I want to add something new." "What's that?" Evan asked, amused. "You'll see." Lara began sketching the tall, familiar buildings of downtown Seattle, shapes she had nearly memorized. Janelle watched her small hand glide across the page with confidence. As Lara continued, she added a slide attached to one of the towers, just like the drawing she'd made earlier that week. But this time, she wrote something at the top of the slide. Janelle leaned closer. "What does that say?" Lara beamed. "It says truth." She shaded the letters boldly so they stood out against the page, because the truth always slides down to where everyone can see it. Evan chuckled. "That is surprisingly accurate." Janelle brushed a hand through Lara's braid, overwhelmed by how much her daughter understood the world in her own simple, powerful way. "Do you know why I wrote it there?" Lara asked. "Why?" Janelle whispered. "Because sometimes grown-ups forget that truth doesn't hide. You just have to look for it." She paused. "Like you did." Emotion welled in Janelle's chest, not heavy, but warm. She pulled Lara close and hugged her tightly. "Thank you, baby," she murmured. "I needed that." As the sky deepened into a richer shade of gold, Evan put an arm around both of them. They sat quietly, watching children run across the playground and listening to distant conversations from families enjoying the evening. Janelle thought about the road ahead. Her new role would bring challenges, expectations, and responsibilities. But she knew she was ready. She had walked through pressure with grace. She had faced sabotage without losing herself. She had stood firm in the truth, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. She looked at Evan. "Thank you for giving me space to fight my own battles." He smiled softly. "You never needed me to fight for you. You just needed someone who believed in you." "I always have," she whispered. "And I always will." Lara, still holding the drawing, looked between them. "This is a good day." "It is," Janelle said. "A very good day." They remained together until the sun dipped fully behind the horizon, casting a soft blue over the park. Street lights flickered on. Families began packing up. But Janelle felt no rush to leave. Moments like this were rare, moments when life finally aligned, when clarity settled, when purpose felt newly written. She glanced at the drawing once more. The tall buildings, the slide, the bold word, truth. It felt symbolic. It felt earned. It felt right. This was her future, one shaped not by fear, but by strength. One written by her own hand. Before you go, tell me in the comments, would you have stayed quiet or fought back like Janelle? Your voice matters.